What's going on, guys? It's Greg here. You're watching part 4 of the Urban Survival Get Home series, and we're going to talk about how to move through urban terrain in a get home type situation after an urban disaster has just happened or during SHTF. So let's get started. So I'm just going to read some notes that I have here. Before I get started on the details, I'm just going to go over some basics. So what you want to do is you want to stay out of open areas. If you have to cross an open area, move quickly and observe the area for a little bit to look for anything unusual. You want to avoid choke points. You want to stick to less traveled routes. You want to use alternative methods of travel like railroads, tunnels, sewers, elevator shafts, fire escapes, and duct work. And you want to avoid obvious places where people will go, such as supermarkets, gas stations, mass transportation, main highways, and major bridges. So those are the basics. And now I'm going to get into the details. So if I went too fast, I'll just say it again. So you want to stay out of open areas, avoid choke points, stick to less traveled routes, use alternative methods of travel, and avoid obvious places where people will go. So those are the basics. Those are the 5 basics, and now I'm going to read you guys some details. So the first thing is you want to think outside the box. You want to, you want to free your mind, when you're in a urban survival situation, you want to think outside of what you would normally think, You're going to have to use creative methods to get around and to move through the city. Because if you use the traditional sidewalk or you walk in the middle of the street, you're going to be observed by other people. They're going to see you, and it may turn into a situation, a problem. So you want to think outside the box. You want to constantly be looking for alternative ways to travel, and just remember, think outside the box. The next thing would be you want to avoid skylining yourself. Skylining is like, you want to avoid silhouetting yourself. So like if you're standing on the top of a bridge, you can see, somebody can see the outline of your shape from a long distance, because you're standing on like a open area, like the bridge is open and you're standing on the top of the bridge, and somebody could see that for like, a long distance. Same thing, if you're walking on like a railroad, let's say you decide to use a railroad, try not to like walk right on the top of the railroad, because railroads are typically they're elevated, like 10 or 15 feet above the rest of the ground around it. And if somebody's walking on the railroad, typically you can be seen from a long distance away, especially if it's like the railroad's like very straight. If you ever walk on like abandoned railroads, you'll know what I mean. When you go into like a railroad and there's like a long straightaway, you can see people coming from a long distance, from over a mile away. So if you use railroads, try to stay to the outside of the railroad, kind of like on the edges of the railroad, and avoid silhouetting yourself. Don't stand up on the top, try to go down on the bottom, on the sides. How the sides, they have the gravel on the sides. Try to stay on the sides. Don't just walk right down the middle, because that's what people are going to expect, and you're going to stand out from a long distance away. So try to stick to the sides. Stay closer to the bushes, or to the tree line. This way also, if somebody spots you, you can quickly run back into the tree line and you can hide. When moving in an open street, you want to try to hug one side of the street, so this way you're only seen from one side. In a suburban area, you may want to use shrubbery or landscaping in front of people's houses to conceal your movements, as well as move through backyards, which will keep you off the street. So basically, you want to avoid walking through open streets, especially if there's a lot of unrest and there's a lot of chaos. You don't want to walk through open streets, because somebody's going to see you, and if somebody has bad intentions, they're going to try to attack you or ambush you. So you want to stay off of open streets. You want to try to move, if you do have to walk through like an area, it's better off if you can try to stick to one side of the street. So like, I'm going to draw it for you right now. So let's say like, I'm going to draw like a street here. Do like a 4-way intersection. Okay. You know, and then this is your street. All right, so basically, let's say you have your street here. This is a four-way intersection. You got houses here, you got houses here, you got, you know, houses or apartments, whatever you want to, you know, depending on if you're in an urban or suburban area or in the downtown. You know, you're going to have your offices here, or your houses, whatever, your apartments, and then, you know, also on this side as well. So what you want to avoid doing is you don't want to just walk right in the middle here, because you're going to be subjected to, you know, both sides of the street. You know, let's say I'm going to draw like a box, you know, buildings. If you're walking down the street here, what's going to happen is if you're in the middle, then both people on both sides are going to see you walking, you know. So what you want to try to do is, instead of walking down the middle, you want to pick one side of the street and you want to go close to the buildings, as close as possible, so this way people on this side of the street can't see you. You know, they're not going to be able to see you unless they're on the first floor or they happen to be looking straight down. So, you know, you want to stay on one side of the street and hug the buildings as close as you can. This way all you have to deal with is one side. You don't have to deal with both sides, you know. So that takes away 50% of the threat. You know, another thing, if this is like a suburban area, you may have landscaping here, you know, in front. If these are like houses, you're going to have landscaping in front of the houses, and you're going to have cover and concealment here. So you're going to be able to find cover and concealment in the front of people's houses. And when you're moving, you want to try to plan your moves, you know. Don't just, like, you know, walk straight down. Plan your moves from each yard to the next yard, you know. So like, you pick one, you stay at one house, you sit there for a minute, you observe the area, you look around, see if you see any activity that's unusual, and then plan your moves, you know, for the next few blocks. You know, say, okay, I'm going to run behind the big tree in front of this house, then I'm going to run to the car behind that one, you know, then I'm going to run to the big oak, big evergreen cedar in the next house. This way you're constantly moving from one type of cover to the other, you know. And if you can't find cover, then you try to conceal yourself. You stay to the bushes in the landscaping, you know. You can also go in the backyards, you know. Unless there's people there, then, you know, it depends on what stage of SHTF we're talking about. But, you know, you can also cross through backyards. I'm going to get more into that later on, you know, because that's what I'm saying, thinking outside the box, you know. When I was a kid, growing up close to New York City, when I was a kid, we used to play hide and seek. And one of the things that I used to do, you know, was probably, as a kid, it probably wasn't too legal at the time, but, you know, I used to cross through people's backyards, and I would hide in people's backyards, you know, in the neighborhood. Obviously, everybody in the neighborhood knew each other, so it's not a big deal, you know. It's not like I was going into people's backyards that I didn't know. But, you know, one of the things that I would do is, let's say, like, we would start on, like, one side of the block, and then we would have to run and hide. And what I would do is I would cross through the backyards of every house, you know, and then I would find a good hiding spot on the other side of the block. And it would be very hard for someone to catch me, because if they were coming and they were looking for me, I could see them. And once I saw them, I could run back through the backyards and get away, you know. So I would use the backyards sort of as like a good concealable area that you could hide, you know, and move through, you know, because people's backyards, they generally have a lot of landscaping, they have a lot of bushes, they have a lot of, you know, garages that you can hide behind, sheds. So the backyards of homes in suburban areas offer a lot of concealment and even some cover too. So you got to keep that in mind. You know, if you're moving through an area, it may be better to cross through people's backyards. If it's you know, a really dangerous situation, and it's too dangerous to be on the streets because of civil unrest, you know, looters, whatever, then you're going to want to go through backyards, because backyards, nobody's going to be there, and you have a lot of concealment, you have a lot of cover. You know, you could move, let's say, like, I'll show you what I mean. You know, let's say, like, this guy has a shed here. You know, he's got some bushes, you know. This guy has another shed. You know, typically houses in suburban areas, they almost always have sheds or garages, behind them, because the houses are too small to have their own attached garage. So they're going to have garages that are detached from the house, and typically people are going to have sheds too. You know, so like here, for example, we have these. Let's say this is a suburban area. These are houses, and then in the back here you have, you know, these the squares represent like garages, you know. So each house has a detached garage, and then the smaller square is a shed, and then these round things may represent like trees or landscaping. So you're going to be able to move from one house to the next piece of, you can go from like one piece of cover to another, you know, and you can conceal yourself the whole time. You can go from one garage to the next, you know, to a shed, and then you can stay behind the trees. That's what I used to do when I was a kid, and it worked very well. You know, another thing too is if somebody's coming after you, you can lose them that way. Let's say if you're being pursued by somebody's trying to track you. It could be a group of gang members. They want to track you down and they want to take your stuff. Or it could just be some weirdos. You don't know, you know. If somebody's tracking you, you can lose them through backyards, because you can, you know, you can snake your way through different backyards, and you can come out in different streets. You can go through different areas, and you can lose somebody that way, you know. You know, you could also find a place to hide. You know, if there's plenty of landscaping, you could hide somewhere. And then if they're tracking you, you can counterattack them, because what you could do is you can hide somewhere, and if they're tracking you, you can hear them coming at some point. If you hide behind like a bush or something, once they come, you can counter ambush them. You could ambush them. So that's something to think about. So that's you know, my tip to you guys as far as moving through a suburban area or urban area. Try to stay off the streets as much as possible. You know, if you gotta pick one side of the street, don't just go in the middle. And if you can get into the backyards, that's even better. But you know, it all depends on what stage of rule of law. You know, obviously, if there's people there, you know, if it's still like a recently occurring situation, you don't want to just, you know, go in people's backyards, because you know, you're going to be trespassing, you know, so you don't want to do that. I'm talking about a situation where there's chaos and civil unrest. You know, you're going to want to stay off the streets. You don't want to be just walking in the middle of the street, you know. You know, and like I said, with the open areas, if you have to cross an open area, you want to observe. Like when you get to an open area, let's say it's like a park, or like you have to cross a street, like from one street to another, and you know the streets are obviously open, and somebody, if they could see you run across the street because it's open area, so you want to sit for a second and you want to observe if there's any unusual activity, and then you want to just sprint across really fast. And the key is you want to move fast when you're in an urban area. You want to move fast. You don't want to be slow, because you know, the longer you're there, the more danger you're exposed to. So you want to move quickly. You want to get away from the urban area, because that's where there's going to be chaos. Let's see, what else? You know, generally you want to avoid skylining and silhouetting yourself. You want to stay away from the tops of buildings or in windows in the middle of the day or in the moonlight, where your outline can be seen from far away. So basically, like, you know, if you're on the top of a building, don't just like stand upright on the top of a building, because you could be seen from a long distance. Also, if there's a lot of sun or moon, you know, your shadow is going to be thrown onto the street, and if somebody's on the street, they're going to see your shadow from the top of the building. So, you know, if you're on the top of a building, keep low. You know, don't just walk on the top. You know, same thing with windows. You want to avoid like standing in front of a window. If you have to look out a window, stay a few feet back. You know, you don't want to just be like right in front of the window, because people will see that. So you always want to be back from the windows at least a few feet. And that's also another thing for defensive tactics and combat tactics. I'll talk about that. You know, like many times in the movies you see, like, if there's a gunfight, people are just like sticking their rifles out the window. You don't want to do that, because somebody can take you out. You always want to be a few feet back from the window and shoot through the window from a few feet away. You don't want to just be like right in front of the window, you know. But I'll talk about that in the next video. Let's see. So I talked about skylining and silhouetting. Sewers and storm drains and underground access tunnels are a very good option. Subway access tunnels, you know, for like utility lines, they have access tunnels. Basements of apartments and offices offer good shelter, if you know, from bombs and from fallout. I talk about that in my nuclear attack series. If you go to my nuclear attack series and you click on sheltering, I do a whole thing about how to shelter, what type of good shelters you can pick in an urban area if there was a bomb to go off or there was fallout. I talk about different types of you know, good buildings that would make good natural bomb shelters. So you could check that out if you want to get more into it. You may have to stop and make shelter one night to rest or to get away from the weather, or to get away from weather, or if there's riot in the streets or unrest, you may want to seek shelter while the riots go on. So if there starts to be, whoops, I just moved the camera stand. Sorry, guys. If there starts to be, like, let's say you're on your way home and you're getting home, you know, let's say there's an urban disaster, whatever, terrorist attack, you know, EMP, you know, anything, whatever you can think of, you know, civil unrest, riots, any of that kind of stuff. You're going to want to seek shelter during those periods. If there's like a hurricane or a blizzard, or if there's just like massive riots in the middle of the streets, when those riots are occurring, you're going to want to stay off the streets and you're going to want to hide somewhere and wait until they pass. And you're going to try to move through buildings and get away off the streets, away from those rioters. You know, that's where moving through backyards comes into play. You know, if you can move through backyards, find a way to move through the area without being on the streets, you're going to be much better off, because the rioters are going to be in the middle of the street. They're going to be breaking windows. They're going to be looting. They're going to be attacking people. So you're going to want to seek shelter during times of rioting and unrest. Let's see what else. And you're probably going to have to make shelter the first night. Let's say if you're a long distance away and it may take you 2 or 3 days to get home, you know, you're going to have to stop and make shelter for the night. So you got to think about, you know, where can I shelter? You know, I did a video on that in the Urban Survival series as well. I did the shelter video, so you could check that out. A good area to shelter generally is industrial buildings, because industrial buildings are in areas that are sparsely populated. So I talked about that in one of the other urban survival videos. You know, one of the things that you should do is, you know, right now when there's rule of law and there's no chaos, is to be familiarized with all the industrial areas close to where you live and where you work, you know, and in your city, because industrial areas are generally sparsely populated. People are not going to generally go there. That's not going to be there. If there's like looters or, you know, rioters, their first target is not going to be industrial areas. Their first target is going to be like the easy stuff. They're going to go after like storefronts. They're going to go after grocery stores. They're going to, you know, you've seen it on TV. They throw stuff through the window and they run in and they take it. That's what they're going to do. They're going to be down the main streets. That's where they're going to be. They're not going to be in industrial areas. Industrial areas, for the most part, are going to be pretty safe, because people are not going to go there because there's nothing really there for them. You know, most people are looking for the easy stuff. They're looking for the low-hanging fruit. If you go to an industrial area, there may even be resources there. You may find some metals. You may find some petrochemicals, some oils. You can make an improvised fuel. You know, if you can find a car and you can hot start a car, you can, you know, find some diesel fuel. You can find some oil. You can make some fuel. You know, there's a lot of things you can do in an industrial area. Industrial areas generally have a lot of fuel storage areas. You know, you may be able to find some diesel fuel. You may be able to find some gasoline. Even if you don't find a whole tank, you may be able to just find a jerry can laying around in like a shop somewhere, and you may be able to use that to help you get out of the area. You know, if you have to hot start a car and get out, you know, you have to do what you have to do to survive. You know, I'm not talking about doing that now. I'm saying when there's total chaos and, you know, you have to evacuate the area, you know. So let's see here. What else? So yeah, so they're sparsely populated. You know, ideally you wanna pick a spot on the second floor if you're taking shelter in an industrial area or any kind of building, because it'll still let you jump out if you need to, but it gives you a tactical advantage so if there's intruders coming, you're going to be on the high ground. You're going to know that they're coming, and you're going to have an advantage because you'll be on the second floor, but it's still low enough that you can jump out. You know, I talk about this in the other video, but preferably you want to pick shelter in the corner of a building, because when you're in the corner, you have walls on both sides, so you only have to deal with threats coming from the front, you know. So basically they're going to come into your field of fire, you know. So if like you're in the corner of a building, if somebody's coming in and they want to hurt you, or they want to harm you, you know, you're going to have the advantage because they're going to walk into your kill zone. They're going to walk into your field of fire. If you pick some room in the middle of the building, they can come from any direction, front, back, left, right, you know. So you want to pick the corner of the building. That's the best, most tactically best area. You know, you preferably want a window in your corner room so you can make a quick exit. You know, if you become overwhelmed and you have to make a quick exit, then you want to have, like I said, a corner room, and you want to have like a window that you can get out of. You know, you could jump out of the window. So yeah, many industrial areas have abandoned buildings. Almost all industrial areas in any city have abandoned buildings, so you can seek shelter in them. You never want to enter a building through the first floor or the main door if you can help it, because this is where someone inside will most likely expect it. Try to climb into the second floor somehow, or enter from the roof using a fire ladder. If you have to enter through the bottom floor, find another entrance rather than just going through the main doorway. You know, maybe you can find a duct, you know, that you can climb into or something. Tactically, you're in a weaker position if you have to move up a building from the bottom up than from the top down. So that's why, like SWAT teams, when they make entry into a room, you know, like for example, the Bin Laden compound, they landed on the roof and they had two teams. They had one team go from the top down, and then they had another team make entry on the first floor. You know, but generally speaking, most SWAT teams, when they enter a house, or, you know, any type of direct action team, they're going to land on the roof, and they're going to work their way. They're going to work their way from the top down, because they have the high ground as they're working their way down, and it's also an unexpected way to enter. You know, most people are going to expect for you to enter on the ground floor. Nobody's going to expect for you to enter through the second or third floor. So that's going to give you a little surprise, and it's going to, if there's somebody waiting on the first floor, you're going to be able to bypass that, you know, so you won't get shot or something or whatever. Or mugged, you know. What else? Let's see. Let's see. You need to be ready for anything when you make entry. There may also be booby traps. You need to be ready to react quickly as soon as you make entry to defend yourself. You will want to clear the building before you rest. So you want to just clear the building and make sure nobody's in there. You want to go room to room, make sure nobody's there. I'll go do another separate video about how to do that, because that's, you know, that'll go into defensive tactics. You know, how to clear rooms. You know, there's certain ways that you want to enter a room so you know you have an advantage, so you're not, you know, overwhelmed. Rooftops are good. You can climb on the rooftop, and, you know, you can take shelter on a rooftop. I talked about that. Let's see. Going through alleys and back streets will be safer than staying on the main streets. Let's see. You know, you may want to just try to go from one alleyway to another and then just run across the streets quickly. You know, you don't want to just walk down the street. Let's see here. Canals and flood control or water dispersion systems are another option. You know, so like many cities have flood control systems. They have canals. They have, you know, different types of water dispersion systems. So those are another easy way that you can get out of the city, because those typically, they don't have any obstacles and you can just quickly walk down them. The only thing you got to watch out for is you have to make sure when you're walking that you have a quick way to get out, because you can be quickly ambushed in a canal or in like something like a railroad or a canal, because, you know, it's a funnel, so somebody could be waiting on either side, and when you pass by they can just come out, you know, and attack you. So, You want to have always want to make sure that you have a way to escape, or you want to be close to an escape point. See what else. If you're preparing for an urban emergency or get home, you may want to keep certain tools in your get home bag, like for example bolt cutters, wire cutters, and a pry bar, because you may have to go through fences, you may have to enter buildings. I'm not talking about doing anything illegal here. I'm not talking about burglary or anything like that. I'm talking about, in a life or death situation, in a total emergency where it's just total chaos. You may have to go through fencing, you may have to go into buildings, like I mentioned, for shelter, or to escape from, if somebody's pursuing you, somebody's tracking you, some type of thugs or something. You may have to escape, and if there's a fence in your way, that could hinder your movement. Let's see what else. If you have to cross a bridge, you're going to want to hang out before you cross the bridge. You're going to want to hang out on one side and observe the bridge for quite a while to see if there's any evidence of an ambush or some type of a trap that's set up there. If there's any other people on the other side that may look shady. That sometimes, there could be like gangs waiting, and they may attack you and jump you and take your stuff, and who knows what else they're going to do. So, if you're crossing a bridge, and especially if it's a bridge you can't jump off of, if it's like a high bridge or something like that, or the water's shallow, you want to just observe the other side of the bridge for a few minutes to see if there's anybody there, and make sure it doesn't look shady. Let's see, what else? So if you're walking by buildings, like I said, on the street, you always want to duck your head under first floor windows, because people can see you. Also, when there's basement windows, you want to step over them. You don't want to just walk by a basement window, because somebody could see your feet, or if you're walking by a house, they could see your head. So you want to duck under first floor windows, and you want to step over basement windows. And like I said, use the landscaping. Move from cover to cover, or through a concealed area. Don't just walk in the open if you can avoid it. If you can go through backyards, that's even better. Alleyways, things like that, And then obviously you have your alternate methods of travel, like railroads, underground tunneling, sewers, elevator shafts. If you're going up in a building, an elevator shaft is a good way to go. Or down a building, fire escapes, so. And you just generally want to avoid the obvious places where people are going to go, because that's where there's going to be the most danger, the most chaos. So that's basically it for now. I hope you found this video, educational. And I'll see you guys on the next one. I have to decide what the next part is going to be. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to do defensive tactics on the next part. And I'll talk about, what's a good way to clear rooms if you have to clear rooms. Ideally, you never want to clear rooms by yourself or clear a building by yourself. If it's like a big building that has multiple stories, it may not be worth it for you to go through all the stories and try to clear everything out, because, there's a chance you may get attacked by somebody, and they're going to hear you coming. If they're up there already, they may hear you coming, or if they have a large group, you're going to be overwhelmed, so generally you don't really want to clear a whole building out. You just want to clear like your immediate area. You want to check your immediate location. You don't want to just like start doing a whole sweep of like a 5-story building, because that could take you forever. That's going to take you an hour just to do that. And then, by the time you do that, somebody could enter into the building. So, you want to just clear your immediate area. Where your immediate shelter area is, you want to clear that out, and anything, within a reasonable vicinity. You don't have to clear the whole building, because that's not realistic, especially for one man. You want to remember that you never want to do one man CQB, because if you do one man CQB, you're going to lose, you're going to get overwhelmed. There's no such thing as one man CQB. Nobody does that. All the military services, they always have teams. They don't just enter a house by themselves. Even when cops get called to a house, they always come with backup. There's usually 2 guys. You don't just go with one guy, because that's just, one guy can get ambushed. So just keep that in mind. Stealth is the key. You want to be stealthy. You know, when you're moving through a city, you have to be stealthy. You got to think of yourself like, the best way I could describe it is like if you ever watch the Predator movies, you know, the way that the Predators move, they're very stealthy. You know, they have that cloaking system, and they jump like from one tree to another, and they're jumping from like one rooftop to another, and they're kind of, you know, they're very stealthy. You know, they know how to move through the environment so they don't get caught, and nobody sees them. You know, no people see them. You know, something like that. You want to be like a predator. You know, like in the movies Predators. You want to be like that. You know, you want to be stealthy. You know, you always want to have the tactical advantage. You know, you always want to be one step ahead of everybody else. You always want to be one step ahead when you're entering an area. You will always want to be in an advantageous position. And you always want to think multiple steps ahead. You know, you always want to think what's going to happen here. You know, if I go here, what's going to happen? You know, am I in an advantage? Am I in a disadvantage? You know, where are the potential ambush areas? Is it safe here? You always want to think tactically. You know, you don't want to just move like, you know, like you're walking on a Sunday stroll. You know, you want to always think methodically everything you do. You want to move from cover to cover through concealment. You know, you want to utilize, you know, alternative methods of travel, avoiding open areas, avoid contact with people. That's a big one. You know, you want to avoid unnecessary contact with people. If you talk to someone, don't tell them where you're going. You know, lie to them and tell them, like, you know, if they ask you, you know, what's your name, just make up your name is Bob. You know, my name is Bob, and, you know, I'm Bob the Builder. You know, I own a construction company or something. Just make something up. Don't give them any details about your personality or who you are. Don't tell them what religion you are. If you have an accent, cover up your accent, because, you know, if you run into some people that may have hatred, if they have hatred for immigrants, or they don't like, you know, people with different skin tones, stuff like that, you want to try to cover up your accent. If you're talking to someone, you don't want to give away your position, where you're going to go. If you live somewhere on the east, tell them you're going west. You know, don't tell them where your house is. Don't tell them which direction you are. And you may even want to lie to them and fool them. So tell them that, yeah, I'm going to go this way, but then really go the other way. So this way, if they decide to follow you and stalk you, they're going to just go off into, you know, nowhere. Another thing too is there may be times where people are going to try to track you. They may try to, you know, there may be groups of gangs or some other types of bad elements. They may try to track you. They may try to, you know, ambush you, obviously, but there may be times where they may try to track you down or pursue you. And that may happen over a long distance. Like, they may pick up your track somewhere in the mud, and they may start following you, or they may, if they have like motorbikes, if they have, like, you know, a common thing in a lot of cities, especially near me, is New York City. In New York City, in the Bronx, they had a big problem with the city. And, you know, if they're looking for you, if somebody's tracking you, they can use those dirt bikes to cover a lot of distance very quickly. So if they see, like, that let's say they found like an area where you were sheltering for one night, and they saw that you left a lot of stuff there, like, let's say you left like food wrappers from your energy bars, you know, let's say your Cliff Bar wrappers on the ground, and they saw like your tracks, you know, they may figure, oh, he probably went down the street here. Let's take a ride on the bike and see if we could find him, you know. So they may jump on their two-wheelers, on their, you know, or whatever, their dirt bike, and they're going to try to run, you know, and catch up to you. So, you know, you always want to be aware of that. You want to be always constantly making sure that you're covering up your tracks. You don't want to leave any litter. You know, you don't want to leave any imprints for anything, so somebody can't find you and know that you were there. You know, you want to constantly be covering your tracks, and you don't want to leave any evidence of your that you were there. You know, when you leave an area or you're moving through an area, avoid like avoid like muddy spots where you can leave tracks. You know, don't leave like your garbage around. You know, if you're eating snacks, you know, take your garbage out. You know, if you have to use the bathroom, try to, you know, try to hide your feces, because your feces are going to smell, and the feces are going to attract dogs. They're going to attract people too. People can smell feces. So you want to take your feces, maybe put them in a bag if you can find a bag, and throw them away somewhere, you know, or throw them in a dumpster where the smell of the dumpster is going to, you know, cover up the smell of your feces. Same thing with urine. You know, urine, you can smell urine. Your urine has a strong smell, so you want to urinate far away from where you are. You know, you don't want to, like if you're sheltering somewhere for a night, you don't want to urinate and defecate close to you, because people are going to smell that and they may try to investigate that if they want to see if they want to take something from you. So I think that's basically it. So just be aware of somebody tracking you and try not to leave any traces behind so nobody can track you. And I'll see you guys in the next part. I think I'll do defensive tactics and stuff like that. I'm going to do security tactics and defensive tactics. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I know it's long, you know, but it's got a lot of information in it. So, you know, it's unfortunately videos like this where it's a discussion video, it's just going to take a little longer. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about it. But I'm going to make shorter videos too. All right, guys, take care. God bless.